to be honest, I don't see the repository as a full-time job for me. I started it as a bit of a side gig that I thought that would take for maybe 4 hours a week. And now it's more like a day and a half. So it does take a bit of time to put together because it's sourcing all of the stories, reading everything, and then making sure that I don't want to just pick any tweets to include in the newsletter. I want to make sure that I'm trying to find as many views as possible, and the ones that I'm including in the newsletter are representative of the views that are in the community.
It's the start of the new year, and the thing you don't want on your mind is hacked WordPress websites, malicious code, or some bot taking down your WooCommerce store. Trust the team at Malcare to protect your site or collection of sites if you're an agency. Check out what they have to offer at malcare.com. From scanning, monitoring, firewalls, and automated removal, don't let WordPress security be the thing that keeps you up at night. Use malcare.com. Malcare is brought to you by the same team behind Blog Vault, one of the industry's most trusted backup solutions for WordPress, so why not trust them this year to protect your WordPress site for you? Say thanks to Malcare for supporting the show and start protecting your WordPress website for free at malcare.com. WordPress news is hard. I mean, it's hard to turn it into a real business. I get away with covering WordPress here on the Matt Report because our guests are sharing lessons on how they built their business or spend time telling us how they navigated the community until they found their way. But news, well, that's why the WP Tavern has been the only name in town for a while, loaded with two critical components: a dedicated staff, and they're funded. If you want to make it, you have to do things differently. You have to do things like Rae Morey and her repository newsletter. Today we'll chat about building her WordPress newsletter, background as a journalist, and explore what it takes to really make all of this work. Thanks goes out to Malcare today for sponsoring a month of the Matt Report and the WP Minute. You can help us by visiting buymeacoffee.com/MattReport. Okay, here's Rae kicking things off about her day job.
Not in the WordPress world at all. So Art Processes is, as you said, an experiential design and creative technology company. And we develop experiences for cultural and tourism organizations. So you might go into a gallery or a museum and experience an audio tour, and we create immersive experiences where you can wander around a space and hear audio that's designed especially for that space. It moves with you around a gallery or exhibition. We do precinct technology, virtual queuing, augmented reality experiences, and we do exhibition design in a lot of different spaces. For example, we're doing a brand new exhibition smack bang in the middle of Montana at the moment for a forestry project there. We do the audio guide for the Getty in Los Angeles. So that's an example of the kind of thing I do. For my day job there is communications manager, so I look after publicity, marketing, anything to do with words, I guess, on the website. Yeah, that's kind of what I do for a day job.
Does anybody ever give you like a side eye when maybe a customer comes in and they're like, "We have a WordPress website"? Do they look at you and be like, "Hey, we think we know somebody who kind of knows this to implement whatever project we might have"?
I don't know. To be honest, I kind of play down what I do with WordPress because I don't want to be that person that people kind of like go to asking for can you help me with my website? Yeah. Oh, I hate to say it, but our website, our process actually uses Drupal. So I've had to learn that this year. Not my decision, but yeah, it's been interesting seeing what the competition's all about.
Yeah, that was the second most serious application I used to build websites was Drupal before, or slightly after Front Page. Well, I guess throw Dreamweaver in there too, but it went Front Page, Dreamweaver, and then Drupal, and then WordPress. Drupal's a fantastic platform, I think. I wouldn't use it today, but I still think it's a very powerful platform.
Yeah, it's interesting using it compared to WordPress at the moment. They're very different platforms, but
yeah. How do you find time to do the repository? And Words by Birds, and you have a family. How do you structure your day with all of this stuff?
The honest answer is I have no idea. I think over the past couple of years, I don't know if you're aware, but Melbourne, where I live here in Australia, has been the most locked down city in the world. We've had the most restrictions and lockdowns out of everywhere. It's just the circumstances, I guess, here. But it's given me a lot of time to spend on side projects, I guess. So the repository, I started that with Kim Gestard from Mail Poet back in November 2019, and that was just before the pandemic. And so I guess the repository in a way became a bit of a pandemic passion project that I was working on while in lockdown and has continued through to now. And yeah, I was also on maternity leave from my day job throughout 2020. So that gave me a lot of time to focus on building up the newsletter. And yeah, since returning to my day job part-time, I've just, I guess, structure my week so that part-time work and also have the repository for a day and a half a week. So just try to split up the week to fit everything in. And also I'm very fortunate to have a partner who I co-parent, well, shouldn't say co-parent with. We're very much together, but we split our parenting duties 50-50, which is, we're a very modern family in that respect. So, yeah, we both prioritise our careers, but also our son. So, yeah, so there is a way for mums with a lot of things on to do all the things that they are passionate about.
Do you have a certain structure, and I can share mine as well for the WP Minute, but do you have a certain structure that you wouldn't mind sharing on how you keep track of all of the news? And this obviously is happening throughout the week. Are you jotting things down in a to-do list, in a Notion document, and then at the end you go to write up the email and you just sit down with all of those notes in front of you? How does this all come curated together?
Yeah, look, there's no pulling back the curtain. There's no special fancy way that I do it. My background is in journalism. I studied journalism at uni, and so I naturally just do a lot of note taking all the time because I'm just, every time I see something, I think, oh, that's really cool. And I use Apple Notes on my MacBook Air, on my iPhone. I'm an Apple person and everything syncs. And so I'm constantly taking notes. And I guess with the repository, I use feedly.com to track something like 70 or 80 different websites and blogs. And so I go through that periodically throughout the week just to track what's happening and keep on top of everybody's latest updates. I'm also checking Twitter all the time on my phone, and it's a bit harder to save tweets, so I have to still finding a way to do that really well. But I'm always checking Twitter, whether I'm throughout the day or in the evening while I'm watching TV, having a scroll. And that's mostly, I guess, my research for the repository, just between those two, just seeing what's going on. And I guess also just catching up with people throughout the week in the WordPress community, whether it's just DMing on Twitter or chats over emails and calls. Those are the kinds of ways that I keep in touch with what's going on.
Sure. The newsletter, there's you just said that you're probably tracking 70 to 80 sources of news, or at least news that you can throw into an RSS feed and put into Feedly. Probably 20% of them, I would reckon, are newsletters or have a newsletter component to them. Your newsletter is unique to me, by the way. Or listen, let me take a step. I'm honored for you to be here. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a great writer. I struggle with words, in fact. And I look at your piece as something that it's fantastic. It's unique. It's creative. I look at it as a conversation that ends up in my inbox. Before I knew who you were, I had some other voice in my head, but then I found out who you were, and I was like, oh, now it's your voice every time I read the newsletter. Like, I'm hearing it with this Australian accent, and it's fantastic. But it's much more of, to me anyway, like a conversation, maybe a story. Was that on purpose? Is that a strategy? I don't want to slap strategy on art, but is that a strategy of yours to make it different that way?
When Kim and I originally started the repository, or at least before we started the repository, we were talking about ideas, because Kim and I are both journalists in previous life, and we wanted to bring something to the WordPress community. Then I guess in a way there was that ulterior motive of showing off Mail Poet platform, but also as former journalists, we just wanted to put something together that brought the WordPress news in a way that was, I guess, a lot of news stories in WordPress tend to include a lot of opinion, but we wanted to bring other people's opinions to the fore as well. We wanted to increase the diversity in the news, but not just by having lots of different news sources, but bringing people's opinions that you might not you might not otherwise see. So the format that we came up with, and we still have to this day, was, looking at a particular issue from a lot of different perspectives. So we, like a story recently, like State of the Word, it's not just the actual State of the Word video, but lots of different blog posts and opinions from different people and what they make of the state of the word. So you can kind of read about a news story, but also get the context of where that story fits within the WordPress world, and then varying opinions on what people thought about that. So you can get that kind of more nuanced viewpoint from different people, and have that way of understanding an issue from different viewpoints, because not everybody looks at things the same way. It's nice to kind of read something but then understand where it fits in the ecosystem, and that's the approach that we were going for.
This is a huge question, and I'll let you dissect it and define it and pull pieces out of it as you see fit. WordPress news, like, what is, as somebody with a journalistic background, what does that really mean? Or what should it really mean? And maybe even before you answer that, can you help clarify, like, what a journalist produces versus, let's say, an opinion piece or a commentator might produce? Because, to be honest with you, I didn't discover this recently, but for many years I was just like, oh, I don't know the difference. I didn't know that a journalist doesn't really put opinion into their piece. And there are certain guidelines that one should approach journalism with, versus, I would say, like somebody like a Kara Swisher, who's what I would say is maybe a celebrity journalist, but no longer a journalist. I think is much more on the commentator side for probably many different reasons. But anyway, could you help us define what journalist means to you, should mean in the WordPress space?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's definitely a mix of everything in the WordPress community. I worked in newspaper journalism, and so it was very, and I guess the newspaper I worked for was very straight in that it was news stories. You get one side, you report on one side of the debate, and the other side of the debate, you make sure you have, balanced views on a topic, and you present that. And that's purely without any kind of opinion, and you try to be as objective as possible in the way that you present it. So that's, I guess, very traditional, old-fashioned, old-school journalism. That's kind of where my background is. I guess in the WordPress community, we don't really have anything. I guess the closest to that would probably be Sarah Gooding at WP Tavern. And even then, some of her pieces can have some opinion inserted here and there for her context. She's been in the community for a really long time, so her opinions, I find it fairly valid. But yeah, that's not really, I guess, old school journalism as a lot of people would see it. And then you get, I think blog posts and things like that, where people are offering an opinion, I wouldn't really class that as news so much as opinion and people adding their perspectives to the debate. It's an interesting one in the WordPress community. We don't have a lot of news sources. A lot of people who've tried to start WordPress news over the years haven't been that successful, because it's not a business that is profitable, as we've seen more broadly in the news industry with the rise of the internet and the fighting for advertising and paywalls and all of that kind of thing. In WordPress, we could definitely use more news sources. The greater diversity you have with news, the more accountability businesses have to operate in this environment. The more scrutiny, the better, I think, in terms of businesses operating and making sure that they're operating above board. It would certainly be nice to have more news sources. It's certainly great that there are a lot of people who blog and share their opinion. But I think there's definitely room for more harder news in the WordPress community, particularly over the past year, how we've had so many acquisitions and we're going from an ecosystem full of, I guess, small to medium businesses to we've got big corporates and multinationals, I guess, like Google, that are operating in our ecosystem, and we want to keep those businesses to know around what they're doing. And I'm not saying a way to scare them that they shouldn't be in our ecosystem, but just people want to know what's going on and make sure that they're operating in a fair way.
Let's say news article or piece or research, even if you went to an acquisition that happened a year, 2 years ago, we might be checking in on, let's say, something like an iThemes. It's probably the one that I can think of, at least off the top of my head, that dates pretty far back. Big company getting picked up by a hosting company, and now Corey, who started that company, now runs PostStatus. One might say, okay, let's take a look at what happened with these acquisitions in terms of employment. Are the people still there? Is the product still what it was when they acquired it? What does the price point look like? Have these big hosting companies, which catch a lot of heat because they are big hosting companies, did they just roll it into their mega solution and the once artisanal piece of iThemes is just gone and it's just another toggle? It's just another toggle on the dashboard, right? Is that a fair assessment to say that's the kind of news that or journalism that we would want to see in the space, or at least maybe you would want to see in the space? Not trying to put words in your mouth, but
yeah, I think that kind of journalism would be good. I guess it's interesting because we work in a space with some really big companies, and there are lots of acquisitions going on. It's that would be interesting to see the quality and the end product that's offered to users. Is that being maintained? As I know, there's been a bit of angst with Automotive buying out people plug-in Sandhills development. It'd be interesting to go back in, as you say, in 12 months' time. And from looking at that story as a journalist, you'd probably want to find long-term users and get their perspectives, whether that's on the record or as background for a story, and maybe speak to staff if they're happy to speak, even anonymously, and get their views on and how they think the transition has been. Yeah, those are the kinds of interesting stories that we're not really seeing so much. We're seeing the acquisition and the sale, but we're not really seeing the journey of how acquisitions are tracking. We're not seeing what's happening to, particularly with Automatic buying out so many businesses. What are happening to those businesses? They've bought quite a few in the past year and the past few years. It'd be interesting to see what's happened to the end product, how it's been absorbed into Automatic and WordPress.com, and has it been for, I guess, the greater good in supporting those employees and the businesses, but also providing a more polished product for the end user, if that was the purpose of the acquisition.
I think another topic would be something like core contributors. Which companies are funding core contribution to WordPress core? I think in Matt's State of the Word, which I do have the slides on the WP Minute, which I'll try to link up in the show notes. I think he showed a graphic of Automatic somewhere in the 70-person mark. Yoast coming in, again, this is just off the top of my head, I think second place with maybe 14 people. And then it's like GoDaddy, who just acquired Pagely, who's a multi-billion-dollar are they publicly traded? I better not. See, this is what makes a real journalist. They don't just say things like this.
I'm not sure off the top of my head, to be honest.
I think they're a publicly traded company. If they're not, they're really big. And they've got billions and billions of dollars, but I think only 4 or 5 people who actually contribute to core, and WordPress is a massive part of their business. Why aren't they doing more for WordPress? What's the reason? And how much are they really benefiting off of open source? I think a lot of people give Matt and Automatic a lot of heat around the fact that, well, this is an open source product and this is just all funneling to the top of WordPress.com to make WordPress.com more money. But it's, oh, by the way, there are billion-dollar hosting companies leveraging this too, who are not giving back.
Yeah, and don't forget much. Google as well. They're
Google,
a pretty massive company, and I'm not sure exactly how many people they've contributed to how they're contributing to WordPress 5.9, but yeah, it'd be interesting. But you also mentioned Yoast in there, and I wonder if they'll increase their contributor numbers now that Newfold Digital has acquired them. It'd be interesting to see how that contribution space changes, and also in the State of the Word, Matt shared how he would like to see that landscape of contribution change in the coming years. So yeah, it would be great to see those big businesses putting back more in as far as Five for the Future goes. It's great to see so many smaller individuals and businesses contributing, but also another interesting story I think is over the past year, there's been a drop in volunteers and contributors to the project, and Automatic has picked up the lion's share of that work, which you can't fault Automatic for stepping in and supporting the project in that way. It would be great to see some of the bigger businesses stepping in and putting up resources for that too. I was really pleased to see XWPs has put up contributors for the performance team, and it would be great to see more businesses like that who have that kind of expertise be able to contribute their people to different parts of the project. That could help, because it's not really just about developers, it's also about marketing and design and mobile. There are a lot of different, and education. There are a lot of different spaces that need contributors.
And what I hope we've just done is illustrate how important WordPress news is and could be if there was more funding in the space. So how do we make money doing this, Rae? I want to pivot and talk about that a little bit, because you have the only vehicle for content you put out for WordPress is the newsletter, the repository. You're just sending out email. You're not doing a blog. You're not doing a YouTube channel. You're not doing a podcast yet. And you monetize that through sponsorship. Well, I'll let you. You don't have to say any numbers. It's not a full-time job for you. In other words, it's not supporting you full-time compared to your day job. Maybe one day it will. What do you think it's going to take to make the repository a full-time job? Is there enough of an audience in the WordPress news space to build a true air quotes business? Or should we be selling NFTs to support this?
Maybe, but who knows how long that's going to be around for. To be honest, I don't see the repository as a full-time job for me. I started it as a bit of a side gig that I thought that would take for maybe 4 hours a week. And now it's more like a day and a half. So it does take a bit of time to put together, because it's sourcing all the stories, reading everything, and then making sure that I don't want to just pick any tweets to include in the newsletter. I want to make sure that I'm trying to find as many views as possible, and the ones that I'm including in the newsletter are representative of the views that are in the community, as well as any that might be a bit unusual. I think that it's an interesting one, funding. I'm very lucky to have GoDaddy and Elementor sponsoring the newsletter this year. They've been fantastic sponsors. One thing I do is, when I enter into an agreement with a sponsor, I make it clear that I want to retain editorial independence. So if there are any stories that involve them, good or bad, I'm going to include them in the newsletter. Even earlier in the year, when MailPoll was sponsoring the newsletter for all of last year, and that was fantastic. It allowed the newsletter to really grow. But then when Automatic bought out MailPoet, Automatic took over sponsorship of the newsletter for the first quarter of 2021. And that was part of the agreement as well. I made sure that any stories involving Automatic, we were still going to report on those. I think it's really important, if any publications have sponsorship agreements of that type, that it is very clear that editorial independence is important, and that's separate from sponsorship. There are lots of other different models, as we've discussed before as well of the podcast. There are lots of different models for funding news. It's a bit of experimentation, I think. There's philanthropy, as we've seen, like philanthropic funding model. There are crowdsourced kind of funding models. It's an interesting one, because at the end of the day, everybody wants news, but not everybody's willing to pay for it, and that's the struggle is real there. It's really hard to overcome that, because for a long time, news is, I guess, it's been free on the internet. It's easy to find sources. A lot of people think that they can find it themselves, but the convenience of having a newsletter like the repository brings it all together and makes it more accessible. Yeah.
How do we encourage? I'll fall on this grenade. You don't have to agree with me. Okay. I'll be the guy who says it out loud, but how do we encourage better content to be made? And I say content specifically because I know not everyone doesn't want to cover the inside baseball of WordPress. They don't want to dive deep into stories. I get it, because it's a very small audience. And maybe we'll talk about that in a moment. Like, it's kind of a small audience who really cares about this stuff.
Very niche, yeah.
Versus like, how do I build this Elementor site to make $1,000 a month? That's a much larger audience who cares, again, air quotes, cares about WordPress. How do we encourage others to create better content? Or do you have any any words of wisdom on how to create better content so that we all, the content creators in WordPress, whether it's a journalist, an opinion piece, or maybe even a tutorial, that businesses take us a little bit, brands that sponsor us or donate to us, take us a little bit more serious? Because what I've seen is the oversaturation of asking for like donations and sponsorships, and then the content never gets made. And what I feel like is that kind of hurts us. Maybe not, I don't know, but kind of hurts us, where we knock on that brand's door and we say, hey, we got this great thing. We're pouring so much effort into it. And they go, yeah, that other person burned me for $5,000 and they didn't do the ad read right, or they didn't create the amount of content that we thought, or the content didn't bring us that much traction. So you have this, I'm giving you 5,000, I want 5,001 back. Any words of wisdom for elevating the quality of content, or is it just like survival of the fittest?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic and a good question. The only way I guess I can answer that is from my own experience. When I started the repository, I was really fortunate that I guess I was the writer for the project. It was a collaboration between myself and Kim. So I was writing, Kim was basically bankrolling. He was running his own company, didn't have the time. So it was a collaboration between the two of us. We discussed the news and made the website, and we kicked it off with, I think, 7 subscribers. I can't remember in the first issue, not many. And we got up to about 100 subscribers, and it kind of just plateaued for a while. But we kept on going, and slowly it snowballed. But it took probably a good year of the newsletter to really get to really start growing our subscribers. I think by that stage we might have had 200 or 300 subscribers by the end of the first year, and we were a bit deflated. We thought we'd have more subscribers, and we were trying to become more well known and get more people reading, but it's a pretty hard thing. And so it was when it came time for Kim to step away, when Mailpult was acquired, and then Automatic finished sponsoring after they acquired Mailpult. I was kind of in a spot where I didn't know where I was going to go next with sponsorship. And it was that good year of very slow growth and just focusing on writing something quality that attracted GoDaddy to sponsor. They were our first sponsor who really saw what we were aiming for with the newsletter. Or by that stage,
did they reach out to you?
No, I was really lucky. So Laura Nelson, who works at Mailpoet in their marketing, she's now at WooCommerce. She was absolutely critical in helping develop that relationship. She's a fantastic member in the WordPress community. So she helped introduce us. And yeah, GoDaddy's still a sponsor, and it's their Adam and Courtney and their belief in the newsletter and wanting to. They also have a sponsored section in the newsletter that allows them to share events and other pieces with the community. That's been critical in the ongoing publishing of the newsletter. Yeah, and these kinds of projects can't happen without money. I've got a family to support, so it's an interesting one in terms of how do we keep these kinds of things afloat. And as far as going back to your question about quality content, I think a lot of people want to make money really quickly. And yeah, of course, who doesn't? Everyone wants to make money, but sometimes it does take a slow burn and working on something with the aim of producing something high quality that is going to make some money in the end. And I'm happy to happy to share that the repository is profitable for me. It's not going to be a full-time job, but for what it is at the moment, and I don't have plans for major expansion, but it is in its current form. No, well, I don't have big plans to have a podcast or a big website and do lots of reporting. Subscribers seem pretty happy with what it is at the moment, and I am happy to share that in the new year. Ali Nimmons is coming on board to help with community outreach and increasing the number of voices that are in the newsletter. That's really important for me to make sure we're not just rinse and repeating the same voices over and over again in the newsletter. We want to make sure that the people who are doing awesome things and they might not be as vocal, we want to make sure that they're included as well. And I want the newsletter to be a source of amazing work that's happening across the community, not just the same things over and over again, as can happen in some spaces. Yeah. Other than
one of the things that I think is a challenge is that I think what we want is we want the maybe not even average WordPress user, but maybe above average WordPress user to want to turn into the news, tune into the news, right? Because, hey, maybe the above average WordPress user is an IT professional and she manages 100 multi-sites for a university and, not in the WordPress community, but my God, wouldn't you like to know when Awesomotive buys the suite of plugins that you use, and suddenly you're like, who the heck is Awesomotive? And if I was tuning in to a news coverage, maybe somebody's doing a piece on who Awesomotive is and the background and the history, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if you've thought about this. I don't know if this is something that maybe you even plan to go into with the newsletter. Is like, how do we dip into that segment of the reader, of the demographic? I think of a local newspaper all of a sudden like, we're doing Fashion Week. I know what's going on here. Right? One, you have advertisement. Two, you're hoping that you're doing Fashion Week and you're getting some new eyeballs on the baseline publication. Maybe at that raises more readers in the long run. Is there something like that we can do without selling ourselves to affiliate links? And
oh, geez, that's a tough question. How do you broaden your audience? It's a hard one because WordPress news is so small and niche, and how you reach that kind of other level of users is a tough one. I don't know if I have any answers to that. I'd be interested to hear from other people who might have done it successfully, because I can't think of how it just feels like there's almost like a thin barrier between the people who read, I guess, serious WordPress news, that the core contributors and developers and small business owners and people who are very involved in the community, and then everybody else. It just seems like a big step. And yeah, I don't know. I just don't feel that they're that necessarily interested in how WordPress comes together, or if people who use the platform like that ever will be. That's a really interesting area to explore. Yeah.
I'm gonna say something in hopes that Sarah Gooding is listening to this and she uses this in the headline. But I think that the cap on the audience, and you could probably just, again, you don't have to reveal anything from your side, but I think the cap on the audience of people who really care about the inside WordPress news is probably right around 3,000 human beings on the face of this earth, is the number that I would say of people who actually care about like what Matt says in the State of the Word and how it impacts WordPress for years. I was gonna say months, years to come, or really care about themes getting acquired. I think my number is about 3,000, maybe on a good day 3,500, but I'd say 3,000 is the global reach of WordPress news.
Yeah,
you can use that, Sarah, if you want.
Well, I tell you, I don't have that many subscribers to the newsletter. It's an interesting one, like how many people are really interested in WordPress news, because I've spoken to people who work at Automatic and some other WordPress businesses who work with the community but aren't necessarily interested in the community or
right.
kind of want to be kind of that step away because they don't want to be too involved in it. So it is an interesting number, but also we've got the English-speaking people who are involved in the community, and then we've got the non-English-speaking people who have communities in other parts of the world. So who knows if I assume that number you're thinking are probably English speakers. So if we think about the people who are non-English speakers and are very involved in WordPress, like you can see all the amazing work that Mary Job is doing in Africa, and the amazing WordCamp that was held at WordCamp Spain recently, and the community is just so passionate over there that they even produced a live late night show, pre-recorded, but there are people really passionate about WordPress and the community. Oh, WordPress, the recent WordCamp in Portugal.
Spain.
Was it Portugal recently? Yeah, looking at just their daily schedule of talks throughout the 2 days, it was all very community based, and the events they had on day 2 were everybody getting together and doing things in person together. The whole that whole event was around community and nurturing the connections with people, and so it could be 3,500 people who are really interested in WordPress and they're knowing more about WordPress news. But I would say that number would be a lot bigger once we start thinking about non-English speakers, and I think that's an interesting area to explore. Like, how do we kind of bring those communities together, the English and non-English speakers? How do we bring those people as just people who are interested in WordPress, regardless of language? And that'll be an interesting one to explore in the next year or two as we get closer to exploring when language and translation becomes the dominant focus of the project.
What do you piggyback off of this conversation of how many max amount of audience I might have? The WP Minute, who has only been around for about 6-ish months, the biggest story that it saw was Paul Lacey's story about Gutenberg and how Gutenberg has impacted himself, but also his opinion on how it impacted the community. That one saw about 2,200, 2,300 views to the article and about almost 400 downloads to the podcast episode. And of course, anything that you bring up around Gutenberg and its impact on whatever. I mean, Gutenberg's impact on whatever, the community, the software performance is always going to get a look or view. Are there any other hard-hitting topics you think that might be that we haven't explored yet? By the time this episode goes out, it'll be 2022. Something this year you think, which is kind of interesting, that folks should be paying attention to, or the next topic?
Oh, yeah. I'm interested to see how the acquisition train goes next year in terms of more acquisitions in the space. And also, you can't really get away from Gutenberg, can you? That's going to be a big focus of next year. It really jumped out at me during the State of the Word when Matt was saying we only have a handful of block themes and he'd like to see 3,000 by the end of next year. So it'll be interesting to see. I guess one of the interesting stories will be how block themes become more commercialized. Well, we're going to see more theme authors once 5.9 comes out. Are they going to feel ready to really explore that space? We're going to see a lot more of those themes on Theme Forest and other kinds of marketplaces like that. It'll be interesting to see how that rolls out next year, because after that, Matt was talking about venturing into collaboration as the focus, as the next phase of the roadmap for WordPress. So are we going to see blocks wrap up next year or continue kind of fall into the following year? Yeah. And I think the other thing is also probably more seriously thinking about volunteers and contributors to WordPress. That was a big focus of the State of the Word, and the lack of volunteers thanks to the pandemic. That'd be an interesting thing to watch next year. It's mostly sponsored people who are contributing to WordPress. We see a lot of that. We're going to see more of a drive to have more sponsored people working on the project, or trying to recruit more people who aren't sponsored. That'd be an interesting thing to watch next year as far as contributions go, and how that increases or potentially decreases, I guess we'll say.
Gutenberg everywhere. Blocks, give me all the blocks. Rae, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really can't thank you enough. I could go on for another hour, but I'm sure you're sick and tired of hearing me. Where can folks go to sign up to the newsletter and say thanks online?
Well, if you're interested in joining the repository, it comes out every Friday. Go to the repository.email to sign up. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Matt. I've been listening for years, and it's truly an honor to be featured.
No, it's a pleasure and an honor having you here as well. I also love the repository. Go sign up. The links will be in the show notes. Hey, if you want to support independent WordPress news or content, number one, sign up for the repository. And if you're a big business and you've got some bucks, make sure you knock on Rae's door to say, hey, I'd love to sponsor the newsletter. And then when you're done with her, she'll send you my way to spend $79 to join the WP Minute membership. Get your hand in the weekly WordPress news in our private Discord. Interact with folks like Rae and others who produce the show at buymeacoffee.com/MattReport. We'll see you in the next episode. It's the start of the new year, and the thing you don't want on your mind is hacked WordPress websites, malicious code, or some bot taking down your WooCommerce store. Trust the team at Malcare to protect your site or collection of sites if you're an agency. Check out what they have to offer at malcare.com. From scanning, monitoring, firewalls, and automated removal, don't let WordPress security be the thing that keeps you up at night. Use malcare.com. Malcare is brought to you by the same team behind BlogVault, one of the industry's most trusted backup solutions for WordPress, so why not trust them this year to protect your WordPress site for you? Say thanks to Malcare for supporting the show and start protecting your WordPress website for free at malcare.com.